discussion will be presented in 3 sections, since we are recording it for radio broadcast on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. You are welcome to post questions and comments during the session, and we'll try to answer them online. I'd like to introduce our moderator, Jason Miller, Executive Editor of Federal News Radio, 1500 AM and federalnewsradio.com.
Welcome to the discussion. My guests are Ellen Ardrey, the Associate Director for Support at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency; David Schlendorf, the Assistant Director for Human Resources Division at the FBI; Cynthia Miller, the Chief of Human Resources and Chief Human Capital Officer for the National Security Agency; Dr. Robert Smith, the Director of the National Recruitment for the Customs and Border Protection in the Homeland Security Department; Angie Bailey, the Chief Human Capital Officer for the Homeland Security Department; and Michael Cerrito, the General Manager for LinkedIn's Government Practice. Welcome to the discussion today.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Before we get started, let me set some context for our discussion. Only about 42% of federal employees answering the government-wide survey say they are satisfied with how their agency hires people with the right skills. And when you dive down into the specific agencies, the news doesn't get that much better. The National Science Foundation and NASA are at the top end of that satisfaction spectrum at 61% and 57% respectively, happy with who they have hired. On the other side, there's a host of other agencies stuck in the mid-30% area, such as DHS, Treasury, SSA, and Agriculture. The dissatisfaction is only made worse when you look at the time to hire employees. The Obama administration launched a goal in 2010 to reduce how long it takes to bring in new employees to 80 days on average. Nearly 8 years later, OPM reported just last year that the time to hire remained at over 100 days, and unfortunately it is creeping up. OPM has tried to address many of these systemic challenges by creating direct hire authority for critical skill sets, such as doctors and nurses, as well as cybersecurity and IT modernization workers. And then there are authorities like Schedule A, where an agency can hire a specific skill set for a term appointment of usually 2 years. The U.S. Digital Service, GSA's 18F, other digital service organizations throughout the government has used this authority to bring on staff quickly. But using special hiring authorities doesn't solve the broader problem of recruiting the best employees. The ongoing challenge drove the Trump administration to make improving the workforce a cross-agency goal of the president's management agenda. The workforce goal under the PMA focuses on 3 broad areas, including creating a simple and strategic hiring process. The sub-goal has 6 different objectives. Among those are improving the ability to differentiate applications, qualifications, competencies, and experiences, and even adding hiring process automation. So in the meantime, while the PMA leaders, OMB, DOD, and OPM get going, what can agencies to move beyond the post and pray approach and develop strategies to be more proactive, strategic, and data-driven? How can agencies, hiring managers, and chief human capital officers adapt to the changing demands of the modern talent acquisition landscape in order to build the federal workforce of the future? Well, luckily, that's where our panelists will come in and tell us how they're going to do that. Okay, Cynthia, I laid out all the problems. Tell me how you're fixing it at the NSA, right? What are you guys doing? What is your, if you will, recruiting strategy look like online, in person, all the above?
Okay. Well, first, we do not have a problem recruiting for the NSA.
NSA is the best.
Thank you.
Sorry, guys. I'm just going to tell you there.
Thank you for that. So we use a lot of different venues to include extensive recruitment on campuses, colleges and universities. We also have a lot of referrals from employees internal to NSA, people who've retired from there, others who are familiar with our unique mission. We also have our online tool called the Intelligence Community Applicant Gateway. It's an amazing tool. We've partnered with NGA and have plans to partner with other agencies within the intelligence community where a potential applicant can apply online to either of the 17 agencies potentially, which has proven to be very successful for NSA and NGA to date. So we use a lot of different other mechanisms, and also we participate in a lot of national level conferences to include those that are related to our mission in the cybersecurity arena and diversity.
It's almost like when it comes to NSA, when it comes to recruitment and retainment, I think your retainment rate is like 97% or something like that.
Actually, 98.5.
Sorry, that was a little off. I didn't want to undercut
okay.
you. But it's almost like it's like Coke and Pepsi, right? Everyone knows who the NSA is.
Yes.
So, Dr. Smith, you have a different challenge. Well, everyone knows who CBP is, but you have a much different type of challenge to recruit. Talk about your approach.
Well, Customs and Border Protection uses a layered approach, realizing that it wasn't so long ago where we were able to post a job announcement and receive hundreds of applicants and have a whole bunch of folks to choose from. Obviously, the times have changed a good bit. And we recognize that today we have to, first of all, capitalize on what the digital marketing and advertising does for us. our presence is not necessarily in all of the places where we'd want to recruit from. So the digital marketing and advertising allows us to really expand our reach. Our use of social media and job boards like LinkedIn, for example, play a big part in the success we're finding and getting to those applicants. That's the digital marketing and advertising side of it. On top of that, we have the outreach piece. You have to get out and do the outreach. Folks have to know who you are. It helps to expand your brand. And believe it or not, even with an organization like Customs and Border Protection, not everybody completely understands the brand. They don't realize the mission of safeguarding the America's borders, and they don't realize that we also facilitate and enable trade and travel. We need to make sure they understand that piece. A lot of folks may know a little bit about the law enforcement side of it, the frontline side, and not completely appreciate the mission support side of it. So the way we address that, we do as well visit college campuses. In fiscal year 17, we attended over 3,000 events. We too also realize the benefit of our referrals. We find that just for fiscal year 18 alone, over 20% of our applications are coming from employer referrals. And our veteran population, CBP is very proud of the fact that 30% of our employees are veterans. So we know that that is obviously a great place to go after applicants, people who are job seekers. So our partnerships with the DoD installations, the TAPS offices have yielded great return for us, and we're even expanding on that as we speak. So
it's interesting you bring up the branding piece, because a lot of people think of CBP and go, well, they just stand on the border all day.
Right.
But the trade and travel is huge, and I think people lose sight of that mission area. Is that probably the biggest challenge you guys have, is getting people to say, hey, we're more than just the people who stand on the border all day?
Right, and a lot of folks don't realize that there are so many opportunities that are available. Right now we have over 150 positions under trade. We're looking for auditors, and those jobs exist not just in a single location, but from Miami to Boston to Long Beach. And I'd also say, it's funny because a lot of people don't realize the full mission. The fact that we were all able to bring mom flowers on Mother's Day had a lot to do with our agricultural specialists and how they clear the imports of something like flowers. So there's a lot that people don't understand about our organization.
I think that's a issue for CBP, but I think a lot of people in government, except for NSA, but they're separate. Awesome. Michael, talk a bit about LinkedIn and what you've just heard early on so far. But you guys really have changed the way recruiting is done over the last 15 or so years, or however long it's been since you guys launched. I think that the idea of going to LinkedIn to find people, I don't know, I think it feels like everybody does that, at least to start.
Certainly a fair assessment if you look at corporate America. I think 100% of Fortune 100 companies are on LinkedIn as a sourcing tool. The folks at this table are kind of the leading edge of a lot of the changes in government, so that's great to see. When we look at the world of recruitment, we've seen the last 15 years, as somebody mentioned, has really been defined by passive candidate sourcing, right? And that's been getting in front of people that aren't already thinking about you as a place to work, getting into their consideration set. We look at the world today and we kind of say there's a couple things going on that create a different reality. We live in an era of unprecedented levels of open information. And if you think about what that means in the talent acquisition world, the recruitment world, if I'm a candidate, I've basically got access to any company and any job, and frankly any person that works at those companies anywhere in the world almost instantaneously. Likewise, if I'm a recruiter or any of your recruiters, they have instant access to any talent all over the world. The reality is most corporate recruiters, they all have access to the same profiles, same tools like LinkedIn or whatever it might be. So we think passive candidate sourcing is still table stakes, but we think we're in this era where the technology and the information that's out there is changing the game. And now it's not just enough to kind of know where these folks are, right? Know what schools or what companies they work for, but it's about getting in front of them at the right time with the right message in a way that's going to increase your chances of getting them to respond. Because I think underlying all of this is just truly intense levels of competition for talent right now.
I think that's a great segue to Angie, who is facing those intense challenges because of the competition for cyber as one example, but you guys obviously, as Robert said, CBP and others. Talk a little bit about DHS's broader perspective of talent acquisition.
Well, one of the things that we're really finding is that within DHS is that our mission is a huge driver for folks to come in. And so recruiting for folks to actually want our jobs, in many of the cases, we're up to like thousands of applications at one time, and we're actually trying to figure out ways to like, how do we actually cut it off so that we can even humanly manage the number of folks that are interested in our positions. And that's a wide range of our positions. It's not just the ones that are really well known.
The super sexy ones.
Yeah, exactly. It goes on to even, an HR specialist job, for example. And so what we've found, though, is like, and I think you mentioned it a little bit earlier, but it's like then getting them through the process and making sure, because most of our jobs require a clearance. Many of them are top secret clearances and higher. We have polygraphs, like in CBP's case. We have medical exams, physical exams. So there's a whole lot to our process. And so one of the things that we're actually starting to venture over into is this idea of, it's not just about recruiting them, but then how do we do applicant care? So how do we help the applicant get the whole way through the process so that we don't lose them? Because there's a whole lot of quality folks out there that they'll hang with us. They understand it takes a little bit of time to get through, but I think they just need us to pay a little bit more attention to them. So that's just one of our new approaches that DHS is starting to take.
I like the term applicant care. We're going to come back around to that, but I want to talk to David from the FBI first. You've maybe similar to the NSA, branding is probably not your challenge.
Well, it's interesting. For a long time, I think we did the post and pray that you talked about, and Hollywood was our best recruiter. But the FBI has changed pretty dramatically in the last 20 years, and as Robert mentioned, and I think as Cynthia mentioned, there's a lot of jobs in the FBI that people don't realize the FBI does, whether that's psychologists or nurses or forensic accountants or a whole host of other career opportunities in the FBI. So for some of our jobs, the branding really helps, although that also can be a little bit of a detriment in certain communities. One of our big challenges in the FBI has been diversity recruiting, and so in some minority communities, law enforcement or security is not always seen as a career to aspire to, and so we have to take advantage of the brand where it helps us, but also in some cases overcome the brand, or in some cases, as Robert was alluding to, really educate people about all the different opportunities that are in the FBI. And so we've used all the mechanisms that Cynthia and Robert and Angie talked about, got a much larger social media presence today than we had a few years ago. LinkedIn's a big tool for us, but YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. We benefit from having a field office structure in the FBI, so we've got a field office in every major American city, 56 field offices across the country, and then another 350 satellite offices in smaller towns and cities. And so that's our forward deployed workforce, and they're our best recruiters. Every office has a full-time, what we call recruiter or applicant coordinator, whose job is to be doing the community outreach, getting out to the universities, getting out to the different trade associations in their area of responsibility. And one thing that's also been a big change for us is trying to get much more involved, learn from the NSA, get much more involved in academic programs. So we bring in over 1,000 interns across the FBI every summer, and that really, we look at that as a 10-week interview. It's a great chance for us to educate people about the FBI who will go back to campuses and be great recruiters for us, but also a great way for us to interview people for 10 weeks and really make sure they have what it takes to come into the FBI.
And very similar to DHS, you guys are fighting for the same talent around cyber. That's a huge upswing in number of people who the FBI has brought in around cyber experts because of how it's grown. So it's getting those interns in early, obviously, is a great step. Ellen, NGA, we started with the intelligence community on this end with Cynthia. We're going to end of this first segment with you. Talk a little bit about your recruitment side, because it's different than the NSA and different maybe from some of the others we heard.
Sure. We take a hybrid approach, right? We still do the in-person. There's no substitute for that, but we have an increasingly robust online recruitment. Many of the things that you've heard talked about already. LinkedIn is a great source for us. We do a lot of active recruitment of passive candidates. And unlike some of the others at the panel who are talking about rebranding or trying to change the brand, NGA doesn't have a real robust, and we're increasing our presence. We've had tremendous success in bringing in new occupations that we would not traditionally have recruited for, and I think this online presence is very helpful. We're working very hard on a relationship, deep, persistent relationships with trade associations and also with academic institutions, and they are providing not only the skill sets we want, but also the diversity that we seek. And so we've changed our recruitment strategy a little bit, where we are recruiting in advance of attrition. And so we have a very robust pipeline that is already through the many wickets that Angie had talked about, and I know Cynthia is also challenged with. And so they're ready as soon as a vacancy occurs, and we can bring them on, and that's been very successful for us.
I want to talk just a little bit more about in advance of attrition. Are you looking more at the retirement wave that agencies are facing? Meaning we have, pick your number, 30% of all our employees are eligible to retire, so we know a certain number will retire every year, or are you thinking more about there's just natural turnover that you've seen over the years?
Both.
Both.
Right, and we have, we've looked ahead 5-7 years, and we know that the kinds of occupations that we're going to need for our mission are changing dramatically. So we've even had a very aggressive incentivized retirement program over the last 2 years. And so we're replacing that talent.
Angie, you were shaking your head too. Are you guys also looking at that same strategy about looking ahead 3, 5, 7 years?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So data is king here, right? And so we take all the data that we can possibly get and we look at it. We even take all of our recruiting events. We know how much money we're spending, where we're spending the money, which avenues that we're using, whether or not that they've been successful or not. So we can really make sure that we kind of get a return on our investment when it comes to the recruiting events. I wanted to, if you don't mind, just touch a little bit on this idea of, so there's this whole world of digital recruiting, right? But one of the things that we really found with DHS, because we've tried some of these virtual events, because what you'll hear is that the millennials really just want things virtual. But what we've found with DHS is we're like a house of brands, a house of multiple brands. So we created these joint hiring events where we brought, for the first time ever, it was 2 years ago, we brought all of our components together and we said, bring in every cool toy that you have. Bring in your dogs from CBP, right? Bring in your firing ranges, bring in your FEMA response vehicles, bring in TSA's, what they do to get folks through the airports. Secret Service, bring in the Beast, right? The President's limo. We brought in everything. We had like people like lined up around the corner to get in to really just see and experience and feel what DHS is really all about. And so sometimes you can't recreate that in a digital experience. So I think while digital recruiting is effective, what we've found is that this whole in-person touch, feel, smell, everything else about it is what really draws them in.
I think that's a great example. We're going to take a quick break and when we come back, I saw a bunch of you with data. We're going to probably pull on that string a little bit. You're listening to the panel discussion, Recruiting for Government in the Digital Age, sponsored by LinkedIn on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM.